Before we begin, a gentle reminder. If you enjoy calm, thoughtful stories that help you rest and learn at the same time, consider subscribing to this channel. That way, you won't miss future episodes, and your support helps us keep creating relaxing financial stories, just like this one. Now take a deep breath, let your thoughts slow down, and let this story carry you into a calmer space. Welcome to Sleeponomics. Tonight, we begin a story that started not with a giant, but with a quiet decision, a restless mind, and a bold idea, one that would change the way the world shops, reads, and thinks about convenience. This is the story of Amazon, and it begins with a man named Jeff. Jeffrey Preston Bezos was born in 1964 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. From an early age, he was curious. He loved to explore how things worked, taking apart radios, building science projects, and thinking in systems. His grandfather, a retired engineer, was a strong influence. Together, they would repair old equipment, talk about technology, and nurture young Jeff's fascination with structure and logic. Jeff grew up to be highly academic. He graduated as valedictorian from his high school and later studied electrical engineering and computer science at Princeton University. He was not just smart, he was strategic. After graduating in 1986, Bezos began working on Wall Street. He held positions at several firms, including Bankers Trust and D.E. Shaw and Company, a hedge fund. At D.E. Shaw, he quickly rose through the ranks and became one of the youngest vice presidents in the firm's history. But even with success and a high salary, Bezos felt restless. The early 1990s brought with them the dawn of the internet age. He came across a statistic that stunned him. Internet usage was growing at over 2,300% per year. That number would not leave his mind. He began to imagine possibilities. What kinds of businesses could exist entirely online? He made a list. Software, CDs, clothing, even groceries. But one category stood out: books. At the time, no physical bookstore could stock every title. There were simply too many books in the world. But an online store? It could theoretically offer everything. It was a simple idea, but revolutionary. In 1994, Bezos made a life-changing decision. He quit his secure, high-paying job and moved from New York to Seattle. There, he and his wife Mackenzie began building what would become Amazon, originally under the name Cadabra, short for abracadabra. That name, however, was quickly discarded after someone misheard it as cadaver. It was replaced with something bolder, Amazon, inspired by the vast South American river, the largest in the world. He wanted the company to feel expansive from day one. The logo even featured a river winding through the wordmark in its earliest form. And with that, the journey began. Not in a skyscraper or a tech lab, but in a rented home with a garage. Jeff Bezos set up his first office in the garage. His desk? A wooden door resting on two sawhorses, simple, functional, and frugal. That spirit would define Amazon's early years. Together with a small team, Bezos coded the first version of the website. In the summer of 1995, Amazon.com quietly launched. There was no big press event, no flashy marketing campaign, just a basic interface, a search bar, and a list of books. But word spread. Within the first month, they were selling books in all 50 US states and in more than 40 countries. Bezos was so excited that he rang a bell in the office for every new order. Eventually, he had to stop. The bell rang too often. Amazon's early growth was staggering. but profitability was still far away. Bezos made it clear they were reinvesting everything into growth, better servers, more titles, faster delivery. The company operated at a loss, but the strategy was intentional. In 1997, Amazon went public. Its IPO was priced at $18 per share. Investors were cautious. Many still believed the internet was a fad. But Bezos had a message for shareholders, one that was unusual in the fast-moving world of tech. He asked for patience. Amazon, he said, would focus on long-term value, not short-term profits. Over the next 2 years, Amazon began expanding its offerings. CDs, DVDs, electronics. The bookstore was becoming a marketplace. And yet, challenges loomed. The dot-com bubble inflated rapidly in the late 1990s. Dozens of internet companies raised money, hired fast, and spent faster. Many burned out. Bezos, however, remained focused on fundamentals: customer experience, speed, and scale. He wrote annual letters to shareholders that emphasized Amazon's core principles: obsess over customers, invent relentlessly, and think long-term. These values weren't just words, they were woven into Amazon's DNA. By the end of the decade, Amazon was no longer a small startup. It had hundreds of employees and millions in revenue. But it was also burning cash, and critics warned that the business model was unsustainable. Then, in the year 2000, the bubble burst. Hundreds of tech companies vanished, stock prices collapsed, and Amazon, still unprofitable, lost nearly 90% of its market value. Analysts predicted bankruptcy. The media questioned whether Bezos could steer the company through the storm, but he held firm, and the foundation he had built, customer trust, infrastructure, and relentless execution, would soon prove its worth. As the world changed around him, Bezos stayed calm, calculated, and committed. He didn't just want to build a store, he wanted to build a system, one that could survive, adapt, and grow. And so, the story continues. But for now, let's pause here, at the end of Chapter 1. A vision planted, a company born, and a world about to change. Close your eyes, let the story rest within you, and let yourself drift into calm, knowing this is just the beginning. By 1997, just 3 years after Jeff Bezos started Amazon, the company went public. The stock began trading on the NASDAQ under the symbol AMZN. The initial public offering, or IPO, was priced at $18 per share. Investors were curious. This was still early in the internet era, and companies that ended in .com were gaining attention. Many saw Amazon as a risky bet. Selling books online? It sounded niche, even strange. But Bezos had a plan. He wrote in his first letter to shareholders that Amazon would take a long-term view, that it would prioritize growth over profit and innovation over short-term results. Most companies avoided such promises, but Bezos was different. He believed that by investing deeply in infrastructure, customer experience, and logistics, Amazon would win trust and eventually scale. Over the next 2 years, Amazon grew rapidly. It expanded its inventory beyond books, music, movies, electronics. The company was becoming more than a bookstore, but growth came at a cost. Amazon was not profitable. Critics pointed to mounting losses and questioned the model. Some said the internet itself was overhyped. Others believed that Amazon was spending recklessly. Still, customers loved the platform, the convenience, the variety, the ease of shopping from home. By 1999, Jeff Bezos was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. He symbolized the new digital economy, bold, fast-moving, and filled with potential. But around the corner, trouble was brewing. Dozens of other internet companies had gone public. Many had no real revenue. They were raising money based on ideas, not income. The market was overheating. Investors were acting on hype, and slowly, the signs began to appear. Stock prices became unstable. Analysts raised concerns. Insiders sold shares. The dot-com boom was at its peak, and all bubbles eventually burst. Amazon, though stronger than most, would not be spared. In the next part, we'll follow the crash and see how the company faced one of its greatest challenges. The year 2000 arrived with nervous energy. The dot-com bubble, inflated by speculation and buzz, finally began to deflate. Slowly at first, then all at once. Technology stocks collapsed, startups folded, venture capital dried up, confidence was gone. Amazon's stock, once trading at over $100, dropped below $10. Critics called it a falling star. Some predicted bankruptcy. But inside Amazon, Jeff Bezos stayed calm. He didn't try to mask the losses. He didn't fire half the staff in panic. Instead, he focused the company inward, on resilience, on customers, and on execution. Some hard choices had to be made. Amazon reduced its workforce. It closed some operations. It paused expansion. But it didn't stop building. Bezos doubled down on technology. Teams improved warehouse systems. Engineers rebuilt back-end architecture. Amazon became more efficient, not by doing less, but by doing better. Crucially, the company never stopped thinking long-term. While others chased fast recovery, Amazon refined its foundation. Customer service remained a priority. Shipping improved. The website became cleaner, faster, easier to use. And slowly, the company stabilized. In 2002, Amazon posted modest profits for the first time. Not massive numbers, but symbolic. A signal that the strategy might work. Bezos wrote to shareholders again. He reminded them, "We are still in day one." That phrase, day one, would become a guiding principle at Amazon. It meant acting with urgency, thinking like a startup, never settling. Surviving the crash gave Amazon something rare: discipline. It had been through fire, and it had learned how to build with clarity and patience. The next steps wouldn't be about defense, they'd be about offense. Because out of this hard-earned stability, a new idea was forming, one that would change how people shopped forever. That idea was called Prime, and it would soon rewrite the rules of online commerce. The year was 2001. The dot-com dust was still settling. Many companies had vanished. Others had shrunk into silence. And in the middle of this quiet chaos, Amazon quietly began to rebuild. Jeff Bezos knew that survival wasn't enough. The company had to regain momentum, not through hype, but through consistency. One of the first shifts came in how Amazon viewed its own identity. No longer just a bookstore, it began evolving into a retail platform. A place that could sell almost anything, but that vision would take time, technology, and trust. In 2002, Amazon launched a third-party seller program. For the first time, other businesses could list their products on Amazon.com. This was a radical idea at the time, letting others compete directly on your platform. But Bezos believed it would lead to more choice for customers, and that would ultimately strengthen Amazon's position. It worked. Sellers joined. Customers bought. Amazon became not just a store, but a marketplace. Behind the scenes, another transformation was taking place. In logistics, Amazon began investing in warehouse management systems, software to track inventory, and early data tools to predict what products people might want. These investments weren't flashy, but they were powerful. And while the company was still not profitable, something else changed: efficiency. Margins improved, losses narrowed, and by the end of 2003, Amazon finally posted a modest profit. It was a symbolic moment, a sign that the long-term strategy might actually work. But Bezos didn't stop. He saw Amazon not just as a retail company, but as a technology company. He pushed teams to build internal tools that could scale, not just websites, but systems, platforms, and services. This thinking would later lead to Amazon Web Services, but that's a story for another chapter. For now, Amazon was rebuilding, carefully, quietly, and with intention. And something else was beginning to form. A new idea, one that would change how people shopped, not by expanding product lines, but by deepening loyalty. Its name would be simple, but its impact would be enormous. That idea was called Prime. In 2005, Amazon introduced something few people had asked for, but many would come to rely on: Amazon Prime. The concept was simple. For a fixed annual fee, members would get free 2-day shipping on eligible items, no minimum order, no waiting. At the time, the idea was risky. Shipping was expensive. Margins were thin. Some critics called it financial suicide. But Bezos saw something others didn't. He believed that fast, reliable shipping could transform customer behavior, that it could turn casual shoppers into loyal members, that it could make Amazon not just a place to buy, but the first place people looked. Prime launched quietly. There was no major media push, but the impact was immediate. Customers who joined began buying more often. And not just because of convenience, but because the relationship had changed. Amazon was no longer just a seller, it was a service. Inside the company, Prime became a rallying point. Engineers worked to optimize shipping routes. Warehouses were reorganized. Algorithms improved how items were stored and picked. Every second saved in logistics became part of a bigger picture. Soon, Amazon began expanding Prime's value. In 2006, they introduced Prime Video, giving members access to streaming films and TV shows. Over time, more perks followed: music, books, even early access to deals. Prime wasn't just about faster shipping anymore. It was about ecosystem lock-in, giving customers so much value that leaving would feel like a loss. By 2007, millions had signed up, and Prime members were spending significantly more than non-members. The math was working. The vision was becoming reality. Bezos later called Prime one of Amazon's most important innovations, not because of the technology, but because of how it reshaped customer relationships. It was a quiet revolution, built not on advertising or price wars, but on trust, speed, and invisible convenience. And it worked. As Amazon moved forward, Prime would become the backbone of its consumer strategy, a foundation that supported everything else. But while customers were enjoying fast delivery and streaming movies, Amazon was building something even bigger, far away from retail, deep in the cloud. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Amazon created the infrastructure of the internet and turned it into one of the most profitable business moves in history. By the mid-2000s, Amazon had become a stable force in online retail. Prime was gaining momentum, customers were returning more frequently, and the company was gradually proving that its long-term model could work. But behind the scenes, another transformation was beginning. one that had little to do with shopping carts or shipping boxes. It started with an internal problem. Amazon's engineers were moving quickly, building new features, new services, new tools. But the company's infrastructure, its technical foundation, was slowing them down. Every new project required custom server setups. Every application had to be managed manually. Development was bottlenecked. To solve this, Amazon's technical teams began working on internal services that could handle computing, storage, and databases on demand. They didn't know it yet, but they were building the foundations of what would become cloud computing. Jeff Bezos saw potential. He asked a bold question. What if Amazon could offer these internal tools, computing power, storage, and infrastructure, as a service to other companies? In 2006, Amazon officially launched Amazon Web Services, or AWS. It was quiet, technical, and not particularly flashy, but it was revolutionary. For the first time, startups and developers could rent server power by the hour. No more buying hardware, maintaining physical machines, or guessing how much capacity was needed. AWS offered flexibility, speed, and scalability, and it came from a company that most people still thought of as just a bookstore. In the beginning, adoption was slow. Only a few developers and small businesses understood what the cloud really meant. But those who used it loved it. The impact would take time to show, but it would become one of the most important decisions in Amazon's entire history. Because AWS didn't just support other businesses, it would soon become the backbone of Amazon itself, and the profits it generated would quietly fund the company's boldest moves. As AWS began to grow, Amazon found itself in a unique position. It was now both a retailer and a technology company, one that powered not only its own operations, but also thousands of other businesses behind the scenes. By 2010, AWS had expanded its services. It wasn't just offering computing power anymore. It now provided tools for storage, data analysis, databases, machine learning, and more. Companies like Netflix, Dropbox, and Airbnb began using AWS to run their platforms. Startups that once needed huge investments to scale could now launch with only a few clicks on Amazon's cloud. And as more businesses signed up, the revenue began to flow. What made AWS so powerful was not just its technical value, but its margins. While Amazon's retail business often operated with razor-thin profits, AWS offered much higher returns. It became the quiet engine of Amazon's financial success. Internally, Amazon reinvested much of that AWS profit into other areas, expanding logistics, funding Prime Video, building devices like the Kindle and Echo, and growing into new markets. But publicly, AWS remained relatively invisible. It wasn't advertised much. It didn't show up on homepages. Most consumers had no idea that when they watched a movie, ordered a ride, or saved a file, they might be relying on Amazon's servers. The company's philosophy was simple. Infrastructure should be invisible, reliable, and scalable. Bezos often said that the best service is one the customer never has to think about, and with AWS, that principle came to life. By 2015, AWS was generating billions in annual revenue. It wasn't just a side business, it was a pillar, and it gave Amazon something rare, the ability to experiment boldly without fear of short-term loss. While competitors fought for shelf space or advertising clicks, Amazon had something deeper, a platform others depended on. And that platform would allow it to move into entertainment, hardware, smart homes, and even artificial intelligence. The bookstore had built the cloud. and with it, it now held the infrastructure of the internet. But power invites scrutiny, and as Amazon grew larger, so did the questions about labor, about competition, about responsibility. In the next chapter, we'll explore the growing tension between Amazon's dominance and the world watching it rise. By the late 2010s, Amazon was no longer just a tech company or a retailer or a cloud provider. It was all of those things, and more. It had grown into a global force, millions of customers, hundreds of warehouses, a presence in nearly every major economy. But with that growth came attention, and with attention came questions. Amazon's public image began to shift. Once celebrated as an underdog, it was now viewed by some as too big, too powerful, too unchecked. The first wave of scrutiny focused on working conditions. Reports emerged from warehouse employees who described long hours, tight performance targets, and strict surveillance. Some workers said they had little time for breaks. Others claimed that injuries were underreported. Amazon responded. The company said it was constantly improving workplace safety and investing in technology to assist workers. But critics were not convinced. Investigations followed. Journalists published exposés. Documentaries aired. And the phrase Amazon warehouse began to carry a darker tone in the public imagination. At the same time, small businesses raised concerns. Many had once benefited from Amazon's marketplace model, reaching new customers, selling with ease. But as Amazon itself began offering competing products under its own private label brands, sellers felt outmatched. They asked, was Amazon simply hosting the market or also tilting it? Regulators started paying attention. In the United States, Europe, and beyond, lawmakers began looking into Amazon's market power. Accusations included unfair competition, data misuse, and anti-competitive behavior. The company denied wrongdoing. It argued that its scale allowed it to lower prices, expand access, and innovate faster, all to the benefit of consumers. Still, the questions persisted. Amazon was no longer operating in the shadows. It was a giant, and the world had started watching its every move. In the next section, we'll explore how Amazon navigated this pressure and how it defended its model while continuing to expand. As criticism mounted, Amazon faced a delicate challenge. It had built one of the most admired companies in the world, fast, efficient, customer-obsessed. But the very systems that enabled that success were now under ethical scrutiny. Internally, Amazon doubled down on its messaging: customer obsession, operational excellence, long-term thinking. These weren't just slogans. They were part of the culture. But to outsiders, it sometimes felt like efficiency was being prioritized over people. To address concerns, Amazon made some public moves. It raised its minimum wage in the US to $15 per hour, a move praised by some and seen as a competitive tactic by others. It introduced more safety programs in warehouses, and it began publishing sustainability reports, outlining efforts to reduce emissions and improve transparency. Still, critics argued that real change required structural shifts, not just press releases. Meanwhile, Amazon continued expanding. It entered healthcare, acquiring companies like PillPack. It developed Alexa, its voice assistant, integrating it into millions of homes. It launched new hardware, bought content studios, and pushed deeper into logistics, even building its own air fleet. This growth was staggering, and it raised a deeper question. Can a company be this big and still be good? Economists debated. Some said Amazon's efficiency saved consumers billions and lifted entire sectors. Others warned that concentrated power, even when used well, poses systemic risks. Bezos responded publicly at times, but mostly stayed focused. His letters to shareholders continued to emphasize experimentation, customer service, and innovation. He said, "Our job is to invent on behalf of customers." And in many ways, Amazon did just that. But public perception had changed. For some, Amazon represented modern convenience at its best. For others, it symbolized unchecked corporate growth. In truth, both views held some truth, and the tension between them would continue. As the decade closed, one final surprise came. Jeff Bezos announced he would step down as CEO. A new chapter was beginning, and Amazon, though still massive, was about to experience something rare, a change at the very top. For over 25 years, Jeff Bezos had been the driving force behind Amazon. He founded the company, led its strategy, wrote its shareholder letters, and became one of the most recognized business figures in the world. But in early 2021, Bezos made a surprising announcement. He would step down as CEO. He would remain involved as executive chairman, but day-to-day leadership would pass to someone new. That person was Andy Jassy. Jassy wasn't an outsider. He had been with Amazon since the late 1990s and had played a key role in building Amazon Web Services. Under his leadership, AWS had become one of the most profitable and respected parts of the company. Now, Jassy would be responsible for the entire business. The timing was interesting. Amazon was larger than ever, but also under pressure. Regulators were watching closely. Public opinion was divided, and internally, the company was growing more complex. Bezos said he wanted to focus on long-term projects, philanthropy, and innovation. He had launched the Blue Origin space program. He was funding climate initiatives, and he had begun to step back from daily operations even before the official transition. Still, the shift felt significant. Jassy was known for being analytical, detail-oriented, and disciplined, but he was not Bezos. He did not have the same public image. He wasn't a founder. He would need to lead differently. In his first months as CEO, Jassy focused on continuity. He reaffirmed Amazon's commitment to customers, innovation, and long-term thinking. He also faced immediate challenges. The global supply chain was under stress. Inflation was rising. Labor issues were making headlines again, and competition was evolving. Amazon was no longer the only platform in town. Rivals were emerging in retail, streaming, cloud services, and advertising. Jassy's job was not just to maintain the system, it was to evolve it. In the next section, we'll see how Amazon adapted to a changing world under new leadership. Andy Jassy's first years as Amazon's CEO were filled with complexity. The world was recovering from a global pandemic. Consumer habits were shifting, and the technology landscape was moving faster than ever. Inside Amazon, Jassy began to refine operations. Some warehouse expansions were paused. Some projects were slowed. The company began to look more carefully at costs, efficiency, and strategic focus. It was a change in tone, not a dramatic shift, but a sign that the company was entering a more mature phase. Amazon also faced growing competition in cloud computing. Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud were gaining ground. AWS remained the leader, but the market was tightening. Jassy understood this world well, and he pushed for continued innovation. In retail, Amazon continued to invest in automation and logistics. It tested new technologies, including cashierless stores and drone delivery. But public criticism persisted. Employee activism was growing. Shareholder resolutions on climate, equity, and ethics were increasing. Government investigations continued, especially around competition and data practices. Amazon responded with more transparency reports, internal commitments, and public statements. But it was clear, the era of quiet dominance was over. Now, Amazon had to navigate not only growth, but also trust. Jassy, though less visible than Bezos, stayed consistent in his messaging. He emphasized customer focus, long-term thinking, and operational discipline. And while the company faced challenges, it continued to grow in revenue, reach, and relevance. Today, Amazon remains one of the most important companies in the world, but its path forward will require more than technology and logistics. It will require responsibility, vision, and care. And in our next chapter, we'll step back. We'll reflect quietly on what this story tells us and what it might mean for those building, dreaming, and growing in their own way. Let us pause for a moment. We have followed the story of Amazon from a simple idea in a garage to one of the most influential companies on the planet. We have seen its founder take risks, make mistakes, and build with conviction. We have seen growth, pressure, transformation, and challenge. And now, as we near the end of this journey, it is worth stepping back to reflect. Amazon is not a typical business. It is not easy to copy, and it is not easy to explain. It moves quickly, but it thinks slowly. It builds fast, but plans far ahead. It experiments constantly, but holds tightly to a few core principles. At the center of those principles is a phrase that Jeff Bezos repeated often: Day one. Day one means staying hungry. It means avoiding complacency. It means treating every customer, every product, every challenge, as if it is the first time. It is a mindset, a culture, and it has guided Amazon through good times and bad. Of course, Amazon is not perfect. It has faced criticism. It has made missteps. It has grown in ways that raise fair questions. But perhaps that is part of the story too. No company grows without friction. No innovation arrives without trade-offs. And no path is ever fully smooth. Still, there is value in the way Amazon has approached the world. It has shown what is possible when a company dares to think long-term, when it listens deeply to its customers, and when it builds with a sense of discipline, curiosity, and care. Let us now explore what lessons this story might hold for anyone on their own path, in business, in life, or simply in thought. What can we take away from this story? Perhaps the first lesson is that vision matters. Amazon was not built on shortcuts or trends. It was built on a clear idea, pursued over decades, with patience and persistence. The second lesson is that systems scale better than slogans. Amazon did not grow because of big advertising or flashy leadership. It grew because of quiet, powerful systems that supported action, decision-making, and adaptation. The third lesson is that customer focus is not just a strategy, it is a discipline. Amazon listened to feedback. It measured everything. It treated convenience not as a feature, but as a promise. Another lesson is the value of long-term thinking. In a world that rewards short-term results, Amazon made long bets. It invested in infrastructure. It accepted losses for years. And in the end, that approach paid off. But perhaps the final lesson is more human. Every company, every product, every system is built by people. People with ideas, with doubts, with goals. Jeff Bezos may have been the face of Amazon, but behind the scenes were thousands of minds, designers, engineers, warehouse workers, analysts, leaders. Each decision was made by a person, each improvement, each mistake. That reminder matters, because when we see a company like Amazon, it can feel distant, inevitable, untouchable. But it began with a person, with a question, with a choice. And that means the next Amazon, whatever form it takes, may be waiting now in a notebook, on a whiteboard, or in the mind of someone quietly dreaming. Maybe someone like you. So as you close your eyes and rest, let the story of Amazon stay with you, not as a blueprint, but as an invitation to build, to think, and to dream in your own way, on your own terms, and always with intention. The lights have dimmed, the journey is told. From a simple bookstore to a global force, we have followed Amazon's path, not just as a company, but as an idea. And now there is only stillness, no charts, no metrics, no noise, just a quiet space to let it all settle. What we witnessed was more than innovation. It was a rhythm, a way of moving through change with persistence, clarity, and care. In that rhythm, there is something timeless, because behind every business story, there is a human one, someone curious, someone uncertain, someone building something that doesn't exist yet. And that story, in some small way, belongs to all of us. We are all inventors of routines, of systems, of dreams. So let this story of Amazon remind you of what's possible, not because you must build something massive, but because you already carry something valuable, a quiet vision, a patient idea, a willingness to keep going. Let it grow slowly, let it rest when needed, and when the time is right, begin again. Good night.